don't dance like we used to. Silent disco on the floor, baby. Mr. DJ, he'll get me through. When the beat's gone, you can't save me, baby. Smoke and mirrors, pretty lights. Another runaway city boy getting too high. But boys like you tell pretty lies. The 5 a.m. low in your eyes says your heart is changing. Now we don't dance like we used.
This is Broad Radio. For you, by you. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Oh, welcome to Broad Radio. It's so lovely to see you again. This week, my name's Jo Stanley, and I'm joined as co-host this week by former Australian netballer, now commentator and host, the lovely Bianca Chatfield. Hi there, Bianca. You're there.
Debut today.
Oh, it's lovely to have you as debuting with us. What a lovely way to put it. I tell you what, we have a bumper show. You are joining us for a very big day. So what we're going to be talking about today is basically all the known horrors of the universe. We're talking about Trump and his supporters. Comedian Kirsty Webeck is joining us to tell us about facing her fear of spiders. Another thing that is a complete horror to me is when anybody says, bring a plate. So one of our favourite food writers and cooks, Alice Zaslavsky, is joining us to talk about how to bring a plate in style. And if that's not enough for you, we're going to be talking about online harassment and how you can have your say with those nasty internet trolls when we are joined by E-Safety Commissioner Julie Inman-Grant. It's a big show, B.
Oh, it is massive. And I've already got anxiety thinking about majority of what you've just said. So hopefully we can get through the show together.
Yes, we're going to be starting it right after this. Broad Radio is proudly supported by Chemist Warehouse. Chemist Warehouse, great savings every day. Oh, here we are, B. How are you this Tuesday?
Do you know what? I'm going pretty well. I'm in Melbourne. I'm worried that the weather is quite depressing, but we're mid-January and the sunshine isn't out, but that's okay. There's plenty of other things we can be concentrating on right now.
Yes, that's right. Here's a couple of things that we can be concentrating on. If you're watching on YouTube, it would be really awesome if you chucked us a like and subscribe. That would really help us as we start in our development of Broad Radio. And if you're watching on Facebook, chuck us a like as well. Those sorts of things just really assist us as we start out in the development of Broad Radio. Also, while you're watching, why not share a little comment, tell us what you think, join the conversation. It would be really awesome to hear from you. Now,
absolutely, Jo, I was going to say, I watched the first episode when I was in Tassie on holidays and I loved it. And it was great to read all the comments as the show was going. So definitely comment along with us.
Yeah, it would be lovely to hear from you. So, Bianca, we're starting the show with a really important conversation today. We're going to be speaking about online harassment and abuse. It's not a new thing, and I actually fear that maybe it's increasing, perhaps. It's becoming more common. We're going to find out about that in a minute. But we bring it up today because the federal government has released draft laws aimed at protecting Australians against cyber abuse. They released that just before Christmas. These laws would give the E-Safety Commissioner the power to order the removal of seriously harmful online content within 24 hours, among other powers, and they are asking for public consultation. So I'm just looking at the website here, and we'll give this to you again later on, but the website is communications.gov.au/have your say, and just look out there for the new Online Safety Act. You've got until February 14 to give your feedback on that, because it's absolutely critical that they understand what experiences people have had. Bianca, have you experienced online abuse or harassment?
Look, I have, but not in a way that I've heard stories of other people. And for me, being an athlete back in those days, it certainly was never really around. And if it was just more commenting on your performance. But when I stepped into the reality TV world, that was a whole new ballgame, because it was about what they're seeing on screen, people feeling free that they can tell you exactly what they think of you. And I just made a decision very early on. I wasn't going to go down that vortex and look at things and try and avoid reading the comments. Wasn't all possible. But yeah, I don't think I have been experienced anything like what others have. And I am so excited that there's been something done about it, and that we can all have our say. And now we need to have our say before the Feb date, because if we don't say it now, then we're not going to get our chance for a while.
Yeah, I agree. I've been really fortunate myself, B. I haven't received a huge amount of abuse, but it does happen. And when it does, it really gets you right in the guts, because a lot of the time it's very personal. A lot of the time it's a violent threat, which is very unpleasant. We actually, every week, we run a 1-question survey, a More to Say survey, we're calling it. You can enter the survey at any time, broadradio.com.au. And this week we did ask the question, what our audience had experienced with online abuse. And interestingly, well, fortunately, 54% of our audience said that they've never experienced it, which I love. But that does leave 46% of our audience is saying between I get it about every week through to constant harassment that really takes its toll. That's 4%. Now, 4% isn't a lot, but 4% is too much, I think, and for those people that are experiencing it.
My theory is it's going to keep... And my fear is I think it's going to keep growing unless something is done about it, unless people are punished for it. And the whole thing is the anonymous part of it all that happens on whether it's Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media platform. That's the hardest part, I think, to work through. So I think we need to find out more about it.
Yes. Well, let's do that, because we're very fortunate to be joined by what I believe is one of the busiest women in Australia. And she's got a very important role, but she's been kind enough to give us her time this morning. She's the E-Safety Commissioner in Australia, Julie Inman-Grant. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Now, I feel as though it's almost an impossible thing to stop online abuse. Is it getting worse, or are we just hearing more about it?
Well, listen, we have to remember that this is human behavior playing out in an online space. And anytime you set up a platform that stimulates interactivity between people, you're going to have some kind of conflict. But yes, from what we have seen over the past year, particularly with COVID lockdown, what do you expect is going to happen when the whole world converges online? There's fear, there's uncertainty, there's doubt, there's anger, people are losing jobs. One, they're going to lash out at others. And the other interesting trend we've seen is people turning to digital intimacy tools. So they're sexting or doing sexy Skypes when they're separated from their loved ones. So as a result, over the lockdown period from March to about December, we saw about 147% increase in image-based abuse, which is the non-consensual sharing of intimate images and videos. We've also seen a number of people looking for more economic stability, going to sites like OnlyFans to sell nude or intimate photos, and then they're surprised when they're screen captured and shared beyond that what they thought was a contained subscription service. We actually have only had about a 32% increase in youth-based cyberbullying, and the reason for that is that youth-based cyberbullying tends to be peer-to-peer. The bullier is often known. It's also an extension of what's happening in the schoolyard. So when there are holidays or kids are away from each other, we tend to see fewer reports into our office of youth-based cyberbullying. But we have seen a 50% increase in what we call serious adult cyber abuse. We take informal reports for that now. We don't have actual powers. And that's what the new Online Safety Act reforms will provide us. But we do, and we've also seen a 123% increase in child sexual abuse material. So there's a lot of it's become a toxic cesspool more so than it ever has. And there's never been a better time for us to really reflect on the powers that we have and the programs that we've run and what was really missing. And this new package will provide a much broader range of protection, which, by the way, no other country in the world provides to its citizens.
Julie, what an incredibly important job you have, but also what you're doing so far in this space, especially with Australia trying to lead the way. Can you give everyone a bit of an idea about what is possible once this legislation comes in?
Sure. I think it's worth letting people know, because we're what is called a micro agency. We're very small, and so we're just sort of, I guess, gaining traction with the broader Australian public who haven't known to come to us. But the e-safety office was originally established in 2015 as the Children's E-Safety Commissioner, and that was actually after the tragic, what was called the Twitter suicide. By Charlotte Dawson back in 2014. Ironically, I was interviewing for a role at Twitter at the time when they were coming into Australia. But a petition was sent to the government, and people said, this is enough, government needs to step in. Malcolm Turnbull was the ICT minister at the time, and Paul Fletcher was his parliamentary secretary. So they started gingerly. So they started with the children's youth-based cyberbullying scheme. And the idea is that if a child reports to a Facebook or a Snap and it's serious cyberbullying and it's not taken down, we serve as a safety net, and they can come to us and we can advocate on their behalf. And then our programs grew over time. We started taking on a program called eSafety Women, because we know that technology-facilitated abuse is almost ubiquitous in domestic and family violence cases. Tends to be low-tech, but using email or mobile phones, even making cars stall, is a kind of an extension of the coercion, control, and harassment that you see in domestic and family violence situations. We took on image-based abuse in the wake of Christchurch. We were given some very strong new powers around ISP blocking to prevent Christchurch-like events from going viral. And so what's in the realm of the possible now is that we can help adults that are experiencing serious cyber abuse with the intent to harm. So it's going to be a very high threshold, because we are a small agency. We can't go to war with the internet. And it's also the responsibility of these platforms to take down abusive accounts when there are transgressions of their terms of service. So in addition to be able to compel that takedown, to be able to fine perpetrators as a deterrent effect, and fine content hosts that don't take down this content, we also have something in this new legislation called the Basic Online Safety Expectations. We've been undertaking an initiative called Safety by Design. And when we think about getting in cars today, we wouldn't think about getting in a car, because it's mandated, without a seatbelt, without airbags, without other safety protection features. Well, because there's been no regulation or mandatory features to be included in our platforms, they're not including the virtual seatbelts or the guardrails that we need to really, really protect users online. Although for the past 20 years, we've known what the harms are, and platforms know how their services are being weaponized. There's just been a piecemeal efforts and almost a malaise in the C-suite in the tech industry to really tackle these issues. And so this legislation will require all of these platforms, and not just social media, but dating sites, but the iTunes stores to enforce their terms of service when there are rogue apps, and others to live up to a certain degree of certain standards. We can also compel transparency reports to understand what kind of policies they're using and how they're enforcing their policies. Are they being fair and consistent? So this is all about holding the platforms to account, but also advocating on behalf of our citizens, because there is such an power balance between the big behemoths and the tech users. And so this will give us some great tools to be able to help Australians that are in a lot of distress.
How important is it to remove that anonymity from people who are online abusers?
Yeah, anonymity is a bit of a vexed issue in some ways. When you think about it, anonymity can have a really important role in terms of protecting victims of domestic violence or dissidents or others that may need protection. But as we've seen, they can also use anonymity to troll and harass. So it's not an intractable issue, but it's one that's very challenging to deal with. Now, one of the things I believe is that the companies have what we call the signals to see when an account is being abusive. They should be suspending these accounts when they're committing abuse, whether or not they know the identity or not. What this legislation will give us the ability to do is to compel basic device information and account information. And more and more social media companies are starting to collect phone numbers and email addresses so that our investigators can at least find a place to issue a notice or a takedown notice or an infringement notice of some sort. But if you're a real determined predator, you can use VPNs, you can use burner phones, different SIM cards every day. So it's going to be a challenge for a long time because, again, the internet's global. If there is no such thing as a kind of global identity system or even a piece of identity everybody can agree with, should we all be sharing our driver's license or our passports? And what other risk does that create? It probably creates a honeypot for, cyber criminals that want to take your personal identifiable information. So it's a challenging issue. It's not intractable, and we'll be giving some additional tools so that we can at least do our jobs and serve notices and hopefully give citizens some relief.
There's a lot of talk about the freedom of speech issue at the moment, and I'm wondering what your perspective on that is, because people are suggesting you should have freedom of speech, even if that is hurtful to members of the community. How do you see that particular argument?
Well, as you've gathered, I come from the U.S. I've been in Australia 20 years, but the accent was hard to shake. But for those of us that have worked in this space, we know that free speech is not absolute, not when it causes harm to individuals, societies, democratic institutions. And I think this is what we saw with the Capitol Hill riots. A line has to be firmly drawn somewhere. And when I was working within Twitter, what I saw, I was very passionate about joining Twitter because I really did believe in the idea that the internet could allow voices that had previously been unheard could be promoted. And it was a great leveler in many ways. But what I started to see is that women and those of different sexualities, ethnicities, religion, were being terribly trolled. And as you remarked earlier, the way that women, particularly women in the public eye with opinions, the kind of abuse they receive is sexualized, it's violent, it's very different in character to the type of abuse that men would typically cop. It focuses on appearance and the like. Trying to kind of get at a woman's Achilles heel. And the idea is to silence her or to silence a person. And really what social media sadly has been allowed to do, it's been allowed to fester, and misogyny and racism and all these societal ills have been surfaced in a way that it's been weaponized in targeting individuals. And so it really is time for us to step in and make a stand. We've got some programs where we're working with vulnerable communities and making sure that they have the tools that are appropriate for them. For instance, we have a program called WITS, Women Influencing Technology Spaces. It's all about helping women in the public eye who are told to get off the internet when really it's become a professional imperative, to help build their psychological armor, to be able to read a tweet or a post and decide, Do I block it? Do I mute it? Do I report it to the police, or do I go to the e-safety commissioner? There aren't any hard and fast rules. There are strategies that we all have to learn over time to be able to navigate this really complicated world.
Julie, one of our viewers, Michelle Redfern, thank you for sending this in, but she has just said about how online safety is being managed in schools. Do you know how it is at the moment, and do you know what things that can be changed? Because obviously kids are getting phones really early now, and it's just one of those things that seems impossible to be able to stop happening.
Well, it might surprise you that 84% of preschoolers by the age of 4 have an access to a digital device.
Wow.
Now, you'll probably remember that your parents back in the day would put us in front of the TV as the digital babysitter. Of course, the differences with iPads and devices is that they're connected to the internet. And while we can't always be looking over their shoulders, if we don't have the right parental controls, it involved, kids can come across content inadvertently. So we've got some training for parents of under 5s and for early childhood educators, because it actually has to start in the home, because kids are getting technology or access to technology before they're going to school. I think, there's a lot of good work being done in some of the schools, but we've got a fragmented education system. We've got public schools, we've got Catholic schools, we've got independent schools. Most of this is, determined at the state and territory level rather than at the federal level. But we've done a lot of work with departments of education, with schools. We've developed a toolkit for schools so that we can provide schools with a range of materials. How do they set the policies? How do they get parents involved in the online community? How are they teaching what we call the 4 R's of the digital age? Respect, responsibility, building digital resilience, and critical reasoning skills. So all of these things, ultimately, I do think need to be integrated into the curriculum over time and throughout a child's education journey, because what you teach them when they're 6 is going to be very different from what you teach them when they're 13. But if you wait till they're 13, bad habits are probably ingrained and it may be too late.
Well, we thank you so much, Julie. We thank the E-Safety Commission and you yourself as the E-Safety Commissioner. We know that you're the only person playing that role in the world, so we're lucky in Australia that we have that. But we want to encourage you to give your feedback. You have until February 14. Head to communications.gov.au/have-your-say, and the bill is the new Online Safety Act. What are you hoping to hear from people there, Julie?
Well, we want to hear about their experiences. We want to hear from them. Does it go far enough? Does it go too far? And that will be a matter for government. I would also just say to listeners, go to esafety.gov.au if you're a parent or you want to help your grandparent or you're experiencing some form of abuse yourself. We've got tons of education materials, but it's also the place where you can report abuse to us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Julie Inman-Grant, the E-Safety Commissioner. It's great to have you. Hopefully we'll have you again sometime in the year.
Thank you.
In just a moment, comedian Kirsty Webeck is facing her fears of spiders. That's after this.
I'm in a new strategy.
Here she is, Kirsty Webeck. Hello, darling.
It's me. Hello, how you going?
We're really well. I don't have a fear of spiders, so I can't wait to hear what's been going on for you in spiders. What did spiders ever do to you?
Like existed, to begin with. Do you know, I only found out recently that everyone's not scared of spiders. Like, I just thought that we all agreed that they were awful and terrifying. But recently I found out that that's not the case. So I just have this wild phobia, and it is a proper phobia of them, to the point where it's helpful for me to keep my hair short, because when it grows a little bit longer, what happened a little while ago was my fringe got a little bit longer and it flopped in my face one day, and my brain immediately went, "It's a spider." And I went, boom, and smashed myself in the face and had this massive blood nose in public. And I was like, this has to stop.
Kirsty, I've been bitten by a spider. I would show you the spider bite because I've still got a scar from this spider over in Rarotonga in the Cook Islands when I was playing netball over there. And it ended up having a hole in my leg where I could fit a pen lid in because it kind of ate all my muscle. I know this is not helping your fear, but I still don't have feeling in that part of my leg from that bloody spider over there.
That is awful, and you're correct. Immediately I was like, wait up, I'm talking about how I'm trying to overcome my phobia. And Bianca's like, I got eaten by one.
An international one too.
Yeah. They've got no boundaries. That's the problem. I've got an appreciation for them, though. I recently, last week, I went to the Melbourne Museum for the first time ever, and I tried to conquer my fear by having a look at like the skins that some tarantulas had shed. And just hot tip, doesn't work. They're massive. They're about this big. Like they're so huge. And I was in country Victoria as well last week. I had a big week, didn't I?
And been around.
Traveller.
I've been everywhere. I've got a lot going on, okay? You're blessed that I'm here today. And I got binoculars for my birthday. And while I was in country Vic last week, I saw a really meaty spider, and a huge spider, could have been playing netball, Bianca, and like absolutely massive, spinning a web. And I thought, I'm gonna see if I can stand meters back and look at it through my binoculars, and if that's going to be okay. And that sounds like an out there idea, right? And something that you don't want to do as an arachnophobe, but it actually was very cathartic, and because I got to see it actually weaving the web and doing like a little twerk with its bottom.
Cute. With his little bum.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it was like whoop, whoop, to like wrap up the little bit of silk to move on to the next bit. But when I was in school, when I was in year 11, my friend had her P plates and she was driving us home one day from school, and she was driving out of the car park and she was going very slowly, and she was also a massive arachnophobe. And I pulled the visor down in the passenger seat, and there was a huntsman just sitting there, and I panicked. But I knew if I said anything that Mandy would crash the car, right, because she's just as bad as I am. Mm-hmm. So where my brain went, this was the most logical solution. I like put my arm down really slowly, unbuckled the seatbelt, opened the car door, and rolled out into the curb while the car was moving.
Just look after yourself.
Well, she put the brakes on and came around the car and was bewildered and a bit irate, as you would be if someone spontaneously exited your moving car. And she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was wedged in between the car and the gutter. And I was lying there, and I just like pointed up like that, up at the visor, and she had a look, and she was like, "All right, fair enough."
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know where I'm at in my journey, but I'm actively trying. I'm trying to rectify the situation.
I just
okay. Well, probably don't go to the Cook Islands.
Yeah, well, don't go to the Cook Islands.
Yeah.
But also,
yeah,
I don't know. Don't you reckon we're at an age now where you just go, well, that's my fear. That's a part of who I am. Why would I change it? You're okay. It's not like you're living in the jungle.
Yeah, but it's a miracle I'm okay, Jo. Like, I exited a moving vehicle and I punched myself in the face.
Don't go on.
It's an escalation.
I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. Because you know now that's what they're going to do. They're just going to force you to just like lie in a coffin of spiders.
But maybe that's what it would take. I don't think so. Another thing I think I need to do is not talk to Bianca ever again.
Yes. And if you find yourself at a party with her, guaranteed she's going to show you her scar. Where is it?
Yes, I will show you. Well, I would stand up and show you, but I'd have to lift my skirt up, and we don't want to see that. So it's just high up there on my thigh.
Oh, well, there you go. All right. Well, good luck with your fear of spiders there, Kirsty. We hope you make it through another day in this world.
Thank you.
Spiders.
I appreciate it.
Here's the thing that strikes fear into my heart is that when someone says, "Come to my barbecue, bring a plate." I never know how to solve that problem. So in just a moment, celebrity cook, one of Australia's best-selling food writers, Alice Zaslavsky, is going to tell us how to bring a plate in style. That's after this.
In your arena, there's only one race to win. Your own. You never stop, never quit, never look back. You push and test your limits until there are none left. Fuel your performance with INC Dynamic Way to keep you going. Broad Radio. Talking inspo we love, info we need, and sharing more of us. Watch and listen live every Tuesday 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time at broadradio.com.au or find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and LinkedIn at Broad Radio Oz. Talk to us live. Call on 1300 8 Broad. Catch up on demand anytime, anywhere, every time, everywhere. On the train, we'll be here. 2 a.m. existential crisis? We've got you covered. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Well, you might know her as Alice in Frames. She is a best-selling author and food writer. She's one of our favourite cooks. Her latest book, In Praise of Veg, is already sold out. You can get yourself an e-version, which is delightful, but oh, what a success story she is. And we love her. Thanks for joining us, Alice Zaslavsky.
Thank you for having me, Jo Stanley. I'm super excited to be here and can't wait to chat food with you both.
Yes, well, but first, Bianca, we got to talk about the fact that Nigella Lawson has called you a force of nature, Alice. How did this come about?
I suppose that the reason that she said that is because she's just a super kind person. Just thought she'd throw me a bone. But I've had the privilege of spending some time with Nigella when she comes to Australia. I am one of her kind of chosen interviewers. I've done that quite a few times. And so I think having done it enough and having seen me backstage running around like the Tassie devil, she probably couldn't find a better description for me. So I thought, yeah, that'll do. She's a tornado.
Alice, I've been waiting to actually speak to someone who knows Nigella, and because you guys are besties, can you please clarify this for me? I've been seeing a clip going around on social media, and it's now the terminology is used in my household. The fact that she called a microwave a microwave and that she was putting her food in the microwave, is that legit or is she just mucking around?
She has the most wicked sense of humor, and I can just see what would have happened backstage. You know, everybody on that set has been doing this for such a long time. And I think having done the amount of shows that she's done, it's about keeping it fresh and fun for herself as well. It's like Tajay. Yes, you know, I think that people might hear you say Tajay and think, or like a canap. You know, we play with words when we know enough about words. So calling it the microwave, I think, is her way of saying that it might be seen as something that's not necessarily the most luxe thing, but hey, check this out. Now it's so cosmopolitan.
Yeah. Oh, I am all for it, and I'm never calling it a microwave ever again.
I mean, she's super clever because she knows that that's going to go global. Like, you know, everyone's now going to take that into their kitchen and going to be thinking about
100%. And yet it would have been and it would have been just a little joke between everybody on set, and now it is a global sensation.
Yeah, she's brilliant. Now, Alice, I have to raise with you it's a terminology that actually is guaranteed to cause panic in me. I'm not a great cook. I love food, but I'm not, you know, and I'll sort of mess around with recipes and stuff. But I shudder. It's a great Australian tradition, the term bring a plate. Okay, now we're going into the Australia Day weekend, lots of people having barbecues and they're entertaining, and you don't turn up empty-handed. But bring a plate to me, I don't know if you agree with me on this, Bianca, but the pressure to bring something that people eat, it's not going to be a waste of money, it's not going to sit there like a sad, lonely, wet salad at the end of the table that nobody touches. You know, I find that really, really hard to get right.
You're right. It is such an Australian tradition, because I know that for many people who come to Australia and are told to bring a plate, they bring a literal plate to their first barbecue. Pretty sure that my parents might have done just the same. But you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself. I think that's one thing that leads people astray. If you think about coming to someone's house and bringing a bunch of flowers, if somebody says don't bring anything and you might bring a bunch of flowers or a bottle of wine, you're not going to go out and do a wine appreciation course or a floristry course to get the very best whatever it is. You're just going to find something that you like and something that you would like to receive. So if we think about bring a plate in that same way, and if we think about a bowl of salad as a bouquet of flowers, just a couple of ingredients is really all that you need. Some sort of leaf, so it might be rocket or cos lettuce or, baby spinach. And then it might be cherry tomatoes if they're in season, or it might be really lovely Lebanese cucumbers. Or you could even just crumble in some feta. If you're a cheese person, you can think about things like Parmesan or, shaving some Parmesan and some pear or some apple, let's say, and just bringing the dressing on the side. So you can hear there's not very many elements there. It's just a couple and something that people can have a conversation about. So it might be a balsamic that you bring that's been barrel aged, or you could go the other way and make a caramelized balsamic in 5 minutes in your house with just some maple syrup and some cheapo balsamic from the shops that you cook down until it reduces and becomes a syrup. People will not know the difference. They will think that you've splashed out, gotten yourself a microwave and an aged balsamic, and you will bring a salad that everyone will comment on. And because you haven't gone to the effort, you won't feel as attached. I think that's another thing that happens. If you do go to all that effort, you bring that croquembouche and then no one eats it. It hurts. It hurts your feelings. Whereas if you bring yourself like a rocket and pear and drizzled salad, who cares? You can take the rest home, feed it to your kids at night.
I have been through that experience where I bought a salad and I had something on all day, and so I just chucked things together, and when I got there, not one person ate it except me, because I thought I'll just take a token piece of my own salad. It tastes terrible. It looks terrible. You're making it sound easy, but how do we actually make it look good? So who cares about the taste, but how do we make it look stylish so it goes on there and it's attractive to every single person that's at that barbecue?
Leave the dressing off until the very last minute. So whether you have an old jar that you put the dressing in and mix it all together when you get there. So ask the host, even here's my tip to you, is ask the host if you can borrow 2 bowls, mix it in the bigger bowl and then serve it into the smaller bowl. And so that way you get all of the dressing through every leaf and looking lush, and then it goes into the fresh bowl. It'll look very professional and you will feel an absolute pro.
Oh, what I like about that too, Alice, there's some performance element to that, and no one's going to know that you have no idea what you're doing. You're doing it in front of them, and everybody go, "Oh, look at her in the kitchen. Look at her doing preparing food."
Theatrical.
I love this. But okay, so let's take salad out of the equation. Let me tell you, I once, and this really encouraged me enormously. I was in a cafe, and Nick Cave, he of the rock god of Australia, Nick Cave came rushing into the cafe and said, "I'm on my way to a barbecue. I need to take a plate." And he'd obviously left it at the last minute, like all of us. And I thought, well, firstly, I'm impressed that even though you're a rock god, you still feel obligated to take something. But in the end, what he splashed together was a calabrese salad. So it was really just, he got some bocconcini, and he had some basil from the kitchen. They gave it to him because he's Nick Cave, and some Roma tomatoes, and there you go. So you don't have to make it a salad. What else could we take that's not a salad for Bring a Plate?
Oh, my favorite thing to bring for Bring a Plate that's not a salad is fruit. So whether it be some really lush looking ripe mangoes or a box of cherries, never goes astray in summer, because everyone's going to be picking at that fruit. Might be just, some berries that you either whack together or keep separate. So things that people would not necessarily splash out for themselves, but when they go to someone else's house and they see raspberries, they might, be really appreciative of that. So so many cultures in the world actually see fruit as a real gift in and of itself. So why not bring that to Australia and bring a plate of fresh tropical stone fruit, or, some peaches, plums, whatever it is. You don't have to cut it up either. That would be number one. Don't go to the effort of cutting up mango into little pieces or anything like that. See how you go when you get there. See if people want to do it themselves. Make it easier for yourself, even bring the cherries. I'd take all of that back. No stone fruit, no mango. Just bring a box of cherries.
I love that. Just find something that comes in a box.
Like something, and yes.
One thing I love is, and I see it all over Instagram, is all those grazing platters, where people have, so you'll have a bit of fruit, then you'll have your savoury, and you have it all mixed together and it looks beautiful. But by the time people start picking at it, it starts to look really dishevelled and quite old, and you don't want to go near it. How can you mix a bit with your fruit platter? Do you add a bit of chocolate in there somewhere? Like, how do you actually add some more to just a fruit platter?
Yeah. So keep it simple. One thing that you can do, so keep your watermelon actually away from your fruit salad. That's one way of keeping your fruit salad from turning into a big glug. Watermelon is 90% water. So within an hour of being cut, it's going to start to disintegrate and take all the fruit down with it. So that's one thing that you can do. Think about height. So things that keep their shape, like grapes, for example. And if you're thinking about a grazing platter, that's why you see things like grapes, bright colours like strawberries. They're fantastic, and they keep blueberries as well. They are nice little bursts. But again, what you'll find is less is more. So a lot of people create these incredible grazing platters and then they watch them all night. A few things get eaten, but wouldn't it be amazing if you just brought one cheese, arranged a little bit of some grapeage around there. Be like Nick Cave, go into your favourite deli, ask them what the best cheese is at the moment. Bring that. Easy peasy. And as the weather cools down, you might like to think about bringing a brie and popping that in the oven. So just studding it with some garlic, some thyme or rosemary, olive oil, whack it in the oven for, about 10 minutes, mid-hot oven. Comes out gooey. You could bring some crostini, just some crusty bread for people to dip into. I mean, the world is your oyster, truly.
This is what I'm doing next. This is what I'm learning from you, Alice, and I really appreciate you sharing this with us, that I'm just going to walk in and own that kitchen. That's what it seems. Your best recommendation is find a way to make everybody aware that you brought this thing and now you're in the oven. And possibly with a microwave. I love it.
Exactly. Bring attention to yourself and your plate. That's the key.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alice Zaslavsky. Her latest cook, In Praise of Veg, is available online. And will it be available again now that it's sold out?
Yes. So it's gone into its third reprint before the second reprints even hit our shores. So end of January, it'll be out and about in the world, and I can't wait to see what you cook from it. I'm already seeing incredible pictures, plenty of bring a plate inspiration in that book, but I hope that I've left you with plenty from this chat as well.
Thank you so much, Alice. It's just been a delight.
Likewise.
Thanks, Alice.
Broad Radio after this. I just love that advice to just enter the kitchen and own it, or be like Nick Cave. Let's always be like Nick Cave. Bianca, we got a fantastic comment there on YouTube, actually, from Heather, who says that she works in IT and the guys still think it means bring something to eat off. They even bring their own cutlery.
What? Are you joking?
Imagine turning up to a party and going, I just figured you own nothing. I've even brought my own cup, just in case.
That is great. Do you know what? What a positive ray of sunshine Alice is. I just absolutely love chatting to her.
Yeah, she's an absolute joy. So head out and get her book, In Praise of Veg, if you can find it, because it's so hard to get right now. In just a moment, we're going to be speaking with Zoe Daniel about the inauguration that's happening, that little thing that's happening in the United States on Thursday morning, and what is going to become of Trump, and will there be the violence that everybody's fearful will happen. That's after this.
I'm in a new stratosphere.
Well, the world is going to be watching the United States of America this Thursday, early Thursday morning, Australian time, as President-elect Biden is sworn in as the next president. But it feels like there is a lot of threat of violence in the air. What are we heading into? Well, we're very lucky to have our very own expert on US politics, and particularly Trump. She is a journo, former US bureau chief, and we're so happy to have her. Zoe Daniel, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for being a part of Broad Radio. We're really chuffed to have you on the team.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So is this unusual heading into an inauguration to have this threat of violence in the air? Are we heading for some really ugly scenes?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? I mean, what happened earlier in January was certainly unusual. You would always see heavy security on the streets in DC before and during an inauguration. Obviously, usually there are big crowds of people there, but the sort of fortifications that you're seeing in the US Capitol this week are certainly escalated after the Capitol was breached by those Trump supporters on January 6th. So what you're seeing is tens of thousands of National Guard troops on the street, a really high security presence, quite literally military vehicles blocking streets, and a very visible security presence with heavily armed, what appear to be soldiers or National Guard officers standing on street corners. I'm told by friends who are there that the city itself is a ghost town. If you look at a map of the CBD of Washington, just about every street is shut. So I guess having been caught out during those protests in early January, where police at the Capitol were vastly outnumbered by protesters, there is an element of not wanting to be caught out on Inauguration Day when you have all of those VIPs, not to mention the incoming president himself, Joe Biden, there among large groups of people, although it will be less people than usual because the National Mall will be closed, the crowd will be reduced, in part for security reasons, but also there's the secondary factor of COVID to consider.
Absolutely. Zoe, when I was listening to a podcast about this, one thing that surprised me was the threat of violence is not just in Washington. They're quite worried, aren't they, that it will break out all over the country?
Yeah, and I think you've seen increasing propensity for protests, large-scale protests in the US in recent years. I mean, I hark back to the 2016 inauguration when I was there, when Donald Trump was inaugurated for his presidency. It was a freezing cold, dark day, very heavy skies. There was a sense of well, I wouldn't say necessarily impending doom, but it certainly was gloomy compared to the sort of celebratory air that you would expect on Inauguration Day. And that may have been because DC is in effect 90+% Democrat. So the local people in the city were not in support of Donald Trump, although many of his supporters did arrive to see him inaugurated. But we saw scuffles, we saw a burning limousine, for example, we saw windows smashed, we saw a lot of protesters on the street that day. Then you think, well, the next day was the massive Women's March where millions of people were on the street in DC, and that overflowed to cities around the country and ended up being the biggest mass protest in US history until the Black Lives Matter protests broke out earlier in 2020. So you've started to see this willingness for people to come out onto the streets more and more. And I do think that once law and order is challenged and stretched, as it was earlier in January, perhaps that does in part encourage other people to join whatever forthcoming protest might happen on Wednesday or Thursday morning our time. And then there's also that sort of unquantifiable factor of social media, which rallies people up for these kinds of events. So it's difficult to know just how many people will be there and what their intentions are.
And is there a sense for those who normally would be out celebrating the inauguration of a new president? Are they a little bit disheartened that they're not able to do that freely because of this threat of violence?
Well, look, I do think that you won't see the kind of happy hoopla that you often see on an inauguration day. And as I said, we didn't even see that in 2016. In fact, in regard to our coverage that day, one of the producers in Sydney said to me, "Oh, we didn't really get a sense of the pageantry from the coverage." I said, "Well, there just wasn't any. That vibe didn't really exist, and I can't make something up that wasn't there." I'm not expecting to see that kind of pageantry this week either, simply because of massive security presence, the sense of tension, and obviously this sort of weird unfolding situation that we've seen not only since the election in November, but really it sort of started substantially before that. My feeling is that everyone's just hoping that the day goes off relatively smoothly and that we can kind of get it over with in some sort of way that doesn't turn into, at best, a shambles, or at worst, a very violent event. And that's reflected then in the sort of show of force that you're seeing on the streets of the city right now.
And he's hoping that the fact that some of the people who went into the Capitol building and stole stuff and, were trespassing, they're now being fined and charged for those offences, aren't they? So I think surely that's got to set some precedents that if you do something, you will be punished. But hopefully that's the message that's getting across over there in the States.
Yeah, I think it's really debatable whether that does make a difference, and also just to what extent those people will see the full force of the law over time. My sort of first hot take on what happened at the Capitol in early January was that law and order only stands up while people have respect for law and order and fear the consequences of doing something wrong. It was pretty obvious that those people didn't really care, that they were prepared to put that aside for the sake of what they believe deeply is a stolen election, the betrayal of their president. And let's not forget that is what they think, that is what they've been led to believe, and they have embraced that. So the question is just how large is the remaining cohort of people who continue to embrace that and want to visibly make a statement about that on Inauguration Day. That said, it's not going to be an easy target, unlike the Capitol was back in the first week of January with the number of police and pseudo-military on the streets in DC. So it will be very different, and you would expect that would discourage some people. But I think, Bianca, the other point that you made then comes into play. Do people try to do something elsewhere? Do people try to make a statement somewhere that isn't DC, that isn't as heavily policed over that 24-hour period?
Zoe, I know you've been working really hard on your book, Greetings from Trumpland, and I imagine it's the kind of book that you could just write forever because the story of Trump keeps unfolding. What do you see are or is his greatest legacy?
Look, I think the fundamental basis of Trumpism is erosion of truth and delegitimizing truth and trust. And this is something that Donald Trump's been doing since well before he was president. He was a substantial part of the birther movement, for example, that called into question whether Barack Obama was actually born in the United States. Donald Trump's been testing his ability to manipulate what the public will believe for a long time. And he's well and truly deployed that since he began campaigning as president and during his presidency. And when you set that scaffold in such a deliberate way, then it comes to the end, as it is now. You have a lot of people who are fully embracing and on side with his version of truth. So when it comes to the election, in my mind, it's kind of the natural conclusion to everything that Donald Trump had set before, where you have a large portion of the population deeply believing that the election was stolen from him. This is something that he started to push into the public consciousness during 2020 in regard to postal voting and the way that the postal votes would be counted, in the way that people would vote during COVID, all those sorts of factors allowed him to insert doubt around whether the election result would be legitimate. And then what we're seeing now, I think, is in effect a natural ending to the breaking of trust, the fragmenting of truth that he's deliberately worked on over the years.
But now we don't believe that anything is true. We're seeing it with, people not believing the scientists around COVID. People are mistrusting of the vaccination. It's just everywhere now that it feels like no one knows what to believe and no one trusts anything.
Unfortunately, I think truth's become a matter of opinion. Facts are no longer facts. It's just what you choose to believe. It's almost a case of, if I said, well, the sky's blue, you would say, well, is it? Who says? How do we know? We're kind of back to flat earth syndrome in a lot of ways. And that, from my side, is very concerning for democracy overall. And I think that's why Donald Trump's election and eventual demise and what happens next in the US is really fundamental to how the world moves forward. You've seen politicians in various other countries, including our own, embracing elements of Donald Trump's approach around fake news as a very convenient way to sort of push away inconvenient truths for politicians, just to say, oh, well, no, that's fake news, when you know it's actually true, but you don't want to admit that to the public. This is kind of low-level Trumpism. That's become very pervasive. You've seen leaders with dictatorial tendencies in other countries who've been elected, again, embracing elements of Trumpism, particularly the fake news aspect and the erosion of trust to get elected and stay elected to manipulate their populations. If we don't fundamentally believe basic facts, then we are in a lot of trouble. And for me, the big question is, well, after Donald Trump exits office, which he eventually will, what happens then? How do you pull this back? How do you pull back the disbelievers? How do you actually convince people of what is real and what is fiction? Those things have become very blurred, not only over the last 5 years where Donald Trump's been very prominent, but they've certainly become deeply ingrained over that time.
Oh, I don't know the answer to that. How do we pull that back? That's made me feel deeply anxious.
Well, I think authenticity in leadership is really important, even more important than it's ever been. And I think that's something that's becoming harder and harder to find. So I can only hope that those people coming into leadership roles actually understand and embrace and tackle this issue of redeveloping community trust, because, this is fundamental to democracy and everything that the world has worked for a long time, or the Western world, will start to disintegrate if we don't get past this.
Well, at least this week we're seeing the back of Trump, this version of him. So if you are getting up at 3:45 a.m. Australian time to celebrate the end of Trump's presidency, enjoy the champagne. It's never too early for champagne, is what I say. Thanks so much, Zoe.
Pleasure. Thanks, ladies.
We'll be back with more Broad Radio after this.
I'm in a new stratosphere.
Are you all right after that, Bianca? That was pretty terrifying to hear that civilization as we know it could be crumbling around us.
Wasn't it? I just wanted to give her a hug because I thought, imagine what you go through just delving deeper and deeper into the Trump cyclone. I can't handle it, but hopefully things start to get better.
Yeah, make sure you check out Zoe Daniel's book, Greetings from Trumpland, which will be out, I believe, in February. It's going to be an absolute ripper. We want to thank you to everybody who's making comments on YouTube and Facebook. I love this one from El Nihad. I'm from DC and my family is just staying home. Such a stark contrast from when Obama was inaugurated, which is sad, I imagine, for many people in America. So there you have it. Bianca, of course, we love sport and you know a lot about sport. Can you give us a quick update what's going on in sport, particularly for women in sport at the moment?
Okay, so we know before Christmas we had the basketball, so the WNBL played out, and that was won by the Southside Flyers, which that was their very first year in the competition. The WBBL was won by the Sydney Thunder, and they're just starting off now into their one-dayers. So there's plenty of women's sport going on. AFLW and our team, Collingwood, Jo, they won their practice match against North Melbourne. That's kicking off in about 2 weeks. But the thing we can't ignore, and it's not only just a female sport, but men play as well, and that is the tennis. And we know all the players have come to Australia, either in Adelaide or Melbourne at the moment, and they're in quarantine. There's 170 in hard lockdown, and 72 of those are players, because there's been 5 positive tests on those planes that have come to Australia. Now, we knew it was going to be risky. So many people up in arms about the tennis players who are now locked in their hotel rooms doing the 2 weeks hard quarantine. So as an elite athlete, that's pretty tough. They want to prepare, they want to train, they want to be able to eat well, and we're selfish creatures, athletes. We need everything to be perfect to try and perform at our very best. But it's been interesting, and I've just been eating my popcorn as I watch Twitter and watch everybody posting, and the players getting so up in arms about the conditions they're in. And loved hearing Sam Groth come out yesterday, the former Aussie player, who was like, you know what? It's actually so disrespectful for every international player to come to Australia and not abide by the rules that they knew were going to be in place. And, you know, we've even had some tennis players who have come out and they complained about it on their Insta stories, because that's very easy to do on social media. And now they've had to come out and apologise and say, we're sorry. But apparently there was a Zoom briefing call that not many of the players got on. And as individual athletes, tennis players, I think, are very, very different, and that they probably didn't even think about the information before they came here. But they're here. Suck it up, players. Get it done. Right. You're all in the same. You know, that yes, some can train for their 5 hours, but they're all going to come in underdone. So I think that makes it quite equal when they get out there on court eventually in February.
We might get some upsets. That would be pretty cool. I'm also wondering though, B, that those lower level, the players at the bottom of the rankings, they're not sitting in gorgeous hotel rooms like Novak Djokovic and Serena Williams are. So it could be pretty tough for them.
Well, this is the tricky thing, is that, yes, you know, the players who would be out of that top 100 are not having the same hotel sizes as others, and they're not having probably the same equipment. So Djokovic has been quite vocal, and he, I believe, runs a association, like a players association, and that supports a lot of those younger athletes. And so he's out there saying they need exercise equipment in their room. They need to make sure they have elite-friendly food, so they're not getting... I mean, I've done hotel quarantine, and I can tell you, I didn't want to eat half the food. So I can understand why their demands are about making sure their body gets looked after while they're in there. But it's going to be tricky for everybody. And just so everybody knows out there, the reason why a lot of the young players and a lot of tennis players are out here, and they've taken that risk to come out, and we've taken that risk to accept them in, is that playing in these Grand Slams is the only way that they can earn money. And they've all been guaranteed $100,000 if they lose in the first round. So for a lot of those young athletes, they need that money to be able to even attempt to play for the rest of the year. So without many tournaments last year, they're relying on just losing that first round just so they can get some money in their kitty ready to go. So they will be remunerated well, but they're going to have to spend these 2 weeks just locked away.
Well, that's my quote for the show. Suck it up, tennis players. Nice one, B. You call it as you see it, and I do like that. Well, we do want to know from you, what sport do you love watching women play the most? And we invite you to head to our One Question More to Say survey at broadradio.com.au and let us know what is one of your favourite sports to watch women play. And you could win yourself a light stim handheld LED device for your face. Ooh, that's thanks to our friends at Happy Collective. Just treat your face to some light therapy. That's what that's all about. Head to broadradio.com.au. If you're watching on YouTube, we'd love you to like and subscribe for us. If you are watching on Facebook, chuck us a like. It's going to help us with our development as we head on. We're only 3 shows in, Bianca. It feels
such
like
babies.
I've been doing this for a while. We are such babies. We're just having a little crack at it. And, you know, we're having the best fun. So thank you so much for joining us. Now, one last thing to mention, Bianca, it is the Queen herself, Dolly Parton's 75th birthday today.
Oh, wow.
I love her
Amazing.
so much.
And she looks incredible still.
She absolutely looks incredible, and she's got so much ambition and sass and drive at 75. I want to be like that at 75. I don't have that energy now. But we thought we would leave you. The end of this show for today is going to be just a little snippet of Dolly Parton at her best. We'll see you next week on Broad Radio.
Bye.
You're psychic?
Well, my mother was. Well, I kind of have a little bit of that.
Really?
Yeah.
Could you read my palm, or could you?
Well, I'm not a fortune teller, but I can try.
What does a clairvoyant do? I don't have a crystal ball here.
It's like, well, let's see. Well, I see that you're gonna be very successful with a late night talk show.
You're amazing! Oh my gosh!
Oh, and that you have a very long career ahead of you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
A long career.
Yeah,
Thank
what's
you. Yeah.
that? I think there's a melted M&M in there. What's that?
I'm framing this. This is going in the Smithsonian. My hand is going in the Smithsonian.